Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 734B. And today's date is August 4th, 2015. And the title of this episode is, Will Russia Support Assad Against the U.S. Proxy Armies? Now, I talk a lot about security. I talk a lot about the NSA spying on us. Of course, now it's not the NSA, which it really is. But they have the USA Freedom Act, which allows the companies to spy on everyone. And what's very interesting about this, since the USA Freedom Act came out, we see Windows 10. And everyone knows, at least I think everyone knows, that people didn't like Windows 8.1 or 8, and then they went up to 8.1. So they decided, we're going to skip 9, we're going to make 10. It's going to be so much better. And they were going to give it away for free to everyone. Everyone will have it. And of the 14 million people who have recently installed Microsoft Windows 10, people are starting to realize something. By default, your privacy is wide open. Very interesting, isn't it? Now, they all knew the USA Freedom Act was coming about. They knew the companies were going to have to collect the information on the people. And we get this Windows 10 where they are data mining. They're getting your emails, they're getting your keystrokes, they're getting your web searches, everything that you do. They are collecting. And it's on, the privacy is off by default. You have to go in, I think it was 23 different screens to shut this down. And right now, people are sitting here going, okay, something is wrong here. Why would they do this? The European Digital Rights Organization said that Microsoft had given itself broad rights and would sell your data to third parties. Tech bloggers are upset that defaults are set for automatic intrusion. And I've always said this. You and you and you and me, we all need to protect ourselves. We have to take the responsibility of protecting our privacy. And I still hear people say, I don't care if the government knows everything. I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then the next person you meet on the street, give them your bank account because you don't care about privacy. Give them where you've been. Let them know what porn episodes you've watched. Let them in on videotape you having sex with your girlfriend or whatever, your wife, because you don't care about privacy. Let them know where your valuables are in your house. Give them a key to your house. Why not? And the combination, because you don't care about privacy. You've done nothing wrong. Well, you're doing the same thing now with the government. You're giving this all away. And what that means is you no longer have a choice. It would be your choice if you wanted to give that to a friend or a stranger on the street. But the government's not giving you a choice. They've taken that away from you. And they violated the Fourth Amendment. Now, there's many different ways to protect yourself. You can hide your searches. You can use Start Page. You can use Good Gopher. You don't have to use Google. It will access Google, but it will mask where the searches are coming from. You can also use a product called Block It Pocket. And this is for your phones, for your driver's license, because eventually you're all going to get the real ID that has the RFID chip, a barcode on the back. And blockitpocket.com has these sleeves, and they're made up of like copper, silver, and other metals. They're interwoven into a fabric. You slide your credit card, you slide your driver's license into it, you slide your iPad, your phone into it. It blocks the signal because the government doesn't need to track where you're going. The government doesn't need to know anything about you. You can write your own encryption. You can use an encryption email service to hide your emails because it's none of the government's business in what you're doing. If you decide you want to tell the government, that's fine, but it's your choice. The government right now, and Microsoft and other companies, they're removing your choice. That is not a free and open society. That's a society that's dictating the rules to you. Now, out in Ukraine, we see the Belarusian President Lukashenko Lukashenko, has said that he will not intervene into Ukraine. No one will ever attack Ukraine from our territory. He doesn't support an invasion, and he says, listen, there shouldn't be any troops in Ukraine. There shouldn't be mercenaries. There shouldn't be foreign troops. None of this should be happening. And what we see right now is the United States has troops. The UK has troops. Other nations have troops in Ukraine. And we can see at this point that the contact groups, they met and they discussed the Minsk agreement. And the Minsk agreement talks ended with no agreement. And what's very interesting about this is they couldn't decide on anything. And Ukraine right now is warning European politicians, you better not go into Crimea. They're warning the European politicians, the foreign nationals, that they could be banned from entering Ukraine if they visit Crimea without Kiev's permission. Well, Crimea is not part of Ukraine, it's part of Russia. But they'll ban them coming into Ukraine. They said those who receive this authorization must then only pass through their designated entry points in the Ukraine regions, and that's it. So they're dictating what other foreign officials should do if they want to visit Crimea, which is not part of Ukraine. Think about this for a second. Think about what they're telling the world. You will do what we say, or else you are banned. Now, Poroshenko has now convened and met with his generals to discuss the latest failed bid to negotiate an end to the clashes. Poroshenko has found himself now trapped between the militant Ukrainian nationalists and the Western leaders. I don't think that these two are two different groups. I think the Western leaders and the militant Ukrainian nationalists, they're one and the same. And they're pushing Poroshenko to start war. And if he doesn't start war, the right sector will take him out and war will then continue. So Poroshenko is out there saying we need to clearly determine a plan for strengthening our defenses in case the conflicts escalate. If all of a sudden Russia decides to attack. Now, of course, they're building up this propaganda, and we can tell every time something happens, we get some type of travel advisory warning. July 16th, the U.S. State Department issued a Ukraine travel warning. Now, this is during the peace or the ceasefire agreement. The Department of State warns U.S. citizens to defer all travel to Crimea and the eastern regions of Donetsk and Lugansk, and recommends those U.S. citizens currently living in these areas leave at once. Now, why would they be asking them to do this if there's a ceasefire agreement where they're trying to talk about peace and stopping all this bloodshed? They said Russian-backed separatists continue to control the areas despite signing the ceasefire agreement by representatives of Ukraine, which is occupied by Russia. The Russian Federation is likely to take further actions in Crimea throughout the remainder of 2015. Now, we saw this warning just the other day about going into the Middle East, going into India, and we see this on July 16th about Ukraine and Crimea. Now, the U.S. State Department, as we know, rejects the legitimacy of the Donetsk, Lugansk area, and Crimea, because they know if they allow these regions to stay intact, they will force the puppet government out of power. And this is what they are worried about. Now, the question is, why would the people in Lugansk and Donetsk, why would they remove the puppet government? What is Obama so worried about? Well, if you look back in time, you will see that those people in that area, 90% of them voted for Yanukovych. You know, the elected official in Ukraine who was overthrown by the U.S. government coup d'etat. So they're saying if they leave this area intact and let them be part of Ukraine in the voting process, eventually they will vote out the puppet government, and they cannot have this. And this is why they're terrorists. This is why they have to get them. Now, we understand that Poroshenko scared everyone because he was out there using his propaganda that Russia was ready to attack the Baltic regions. Now, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and many of the other Baltic countries, they want now the American Stinger surface-to-air missiles. They all want them because of the Russian escalations. Now, of course, as we know, they use this propaganda to increase sales, to scare everyone, to bring in more military assets, more soldiers, because they do this on purpose because they know eventually war is going to start in this area. We see out in Iran. Iran is now setting up joint commissions on economic cooperation. They're doing it with Italy right now and many other countries because of these peace talks. Because they're going to be able to do business with many different countries right now. As long as the central bankers maintain control of the country and they have the dollar on their natural resources when they sell it, and that is oil. Once that falls apart, guess what? All bets are off. They will try to remove that government. We see Libya is completely deteriorating. The government in Tripoli that was put there by the people of Libya, they're not part of the peace process. Kerry is trying to go over there, trying to reignite the peace process. They're trying to put all the pieces back together, but it's not working. The people have taken over and they have spoken. And of course, right now, we have two governments. Well, we have one official that's in Tripoli. The other one is on the outskirts in a different area, trying to run the country. Of course, that puppet government is only protecting one thing and one thing only, and it's not the people. It's the shipping access for oil and the oil fields. That's it. That's what they're protecting. And if they can get Libya through on this peace deal, they've already made arrangements with the British to come in and bring in troops to basically stabilize the nation. Basically, they're going to lock it down and have troops on the street corners to keep the puppet government in power. This is the plan. But the peace plan is not working out. So you know what the next step is. You know the authorization for war is in Congress. It allows them to go into each of these countries and to restore order, or I should say restore the puppet governments to power. This is what they're trying to do. The U.S. has already issued new sanctions on Syria. They broaden the economic pressure on Syria, imposing sanctions on a far-flung network of 7 overseas companies and 4 individuals. They're putting pressure on the country. They want Assad out. That's it, period, done. And we could see at this point in time, everything is set up for the next event. I mean, look at this right now. As of July 31st, the United States is allowing the Proxy Army to call in airstrikes. I mean, think about this. All signs now are pointing to the possibility that Syria is about to enter the second phase of destabilization, a phase that Libya knows all too well. And when I say the Proxy Army, of course, everyone's like, well, it's the moderate soldiers, it's the Free Syrian Army. No, they're all one and the same. Basically, the Islamic State, the Free Syrian Army, working together, calling in the airstrikes, and of course, you know, the Islamic State is nowhere to be found where the U.S. is striking. It's the Syrian army, it's the infrastructure, and other groups that are causing problems. And we see right now that U.S., Turkey, Israel, they're working as the Air Force for the Islamic State. NATO member Turkey has been busted buying huge quantities of oil from the Islamic State. They do this to fund it because you have to remember, the Proxy Army now has captured about 60% of the oil in Syria. It's being funneled through Turkey. Turkey is giving them funds to operate. We also know in Ukraine, the poppy fields, they're selling as opium, and those funds come to the Islamic State, or the Proxy Army of the United States government, central bankers, and the coalition forces. So what we're seeing here is a huge push into Syria. And it seems like they don't really care that much about if anyone knows that they're using the Islamic State. Right now, the U.S. is expanding their targets in Syria. They're going to include forces loyal to Assad. Very interesting. The widening war effort comes as the U.S. begins to follow through on a promise to support the Syrian rebels. So, who are they really fighting? They're fighting Assad. Now, Russia is completely opposed to all of these U.S. airstrikes in Syria. Lavrov stressed that Russia was opposed to the strikes. Washington never asked the Syrian government for their consent, which he asserted represents a violation of international law and Syria's national sovereignty, which is absolutely true. He also told Kerry that Russia opposed the deployment of U.S.-trained forces in Syria. It makes no sense at this time. Why doesn't the U.S. ask Russia or China to help out if this is a worldwide terrorist fight? I mean, think about it. If this is a problem for everyone, wouldn't you ask Russia? Wouldn't you ask China to help out here? They don't want to because it's the proxy army of the United States. They don't want them to destroy their proxy army. Their mission is to get Assad. And you have to remember, Russia still supports Syria and the people. They've made huge amount of investments in Syria. They just made a new economic deal with them. They're using the ports in Tartus to park their ships. And at this point in time, we've seen the proxy army expand their territory in Syria. The Syrian foreign minister is having a meeting with Iran and Russian officials to talk about what is going on in Syria. Because they all know. And, of course, Syria is very skeptical, saying, okay, this is not making sense anymore. We see what's happening. As we know, the safe zones are going to be zones that are not part of Syria. And they're going to say, see, we never brought ground troops into Syria. We brought them into the safe zones. They're separate and apart from Syria. They don't own it anymore. So we've kept our promise. It's a play on words, that's all. Now, Russia is reportedly ready to send in the paratroopers if Syria requests help from Moscow. Now, is this actually going to happen? We're going to have to wait and see. And this is the problem that the United States government central bankers has always had. Russia backs Assad. Russia, right now, they're using in Ukraine as the enemy. And this is all connected right now. And we can see they're suppressing the oil prices once again to put a lot of pressure on Russia. They tried to bribe Putin one time with the Saudi king, and they tried again to bribe him. Even Erdogan was out there yesterday saying that, yeah, Putin is just going to let Assad go. But I'm not too sure about that. I think that was pure propaganda. They've been saying this for quite a while. And if that is absolutely true, why did they just make all these deals with Assad? Why are they saying we will assist if needed? The Russian airborne troops are ready to assist Syria in countering terrorists. Now, if Syria says, listen, we need help with the Islamic State. We need help because they are overrunning our country. And Russia says, okay, we'll go fight the Islamic State. What can the United States say at this point in time? No, we don't want you fighting the terrorists. That's just not allowed. And then people would wake up and say, wait a minute, you don't want them fighting the terrorists? So they're going to have to make up some type of propaganda story to go along with this. They're going to have to demonize Russia in some way to make it look good and to make it look like this is why we're attacking Russia now. And Russia is saying that they have a long-term good relationship. Many Syrian experts, including military, receive education in Russia. So what we're seeing right now is a complete buildup. And I wouldn't be surprised because we know the authorization for war is pending there in Congress. We know the United States government central bankers has to go back into these countries and clean them up. Because we see what's happening in Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq. And we know the authorization for war allows the U.S. to go into these countries, wherever the Islamic State is, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, or any other type of terrorist organization. And we see, and we know, that eventually they will push something, some type of an event, to get this passed. I mean, right now, they thought they would be able to use the local puppet government forces to handle the situation, but they're losing. They cannot maintain the status quo in these countries. They're losing. We saw what happened in Yemen. This is why they're using Saudi Arabia to bomb the people. We see what's happening in Libya. It's not working out too well. The government was actually kicked out. So things are accelerating in the Middle East, and we are definitely going to see something occur very soon. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.